I watched her slip into the apartment next door wearing nothing but his shirt, and I didn't make a sound. She knew I was awake. Maybe she even wanted me to watch. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just stood there behind the blackout curtain, staring through the slit like a ghost she thought she'd buried. It was 2:13 a.m. She'd been gone for 20 minutes before I realized what the silence meant. Her perfume still lingered on the silk sheets. I remember thinking how strange it was, how silence can scream louder than anything. I could have stormed over there. I could have kicked down the door and made a scene. But I didn't. Because the second I saw her walking barefoot down that marble hallway, laughing, twirling a wine glass, I knew exactly who she was. And I knew exactly what I needed to do. Her name's Camille Rothwell. Heiress. Venture capitalist. Born into old Manhattan money and built her fintech empire before she turned 35. The media called her a visionary. I used to think she was, too. And me? I'm just the guy who coded her kingdom into existence. We met like every modern cautionary tale does, at a party I wasn't supposed to be at. She found me in a corner, half drunk, explaining blockchain scalability to a hedge fund dinosaur. She liked my mind. I liked the way she looked at me like I was more than my zip code. Within a month, I was living in her penthouse, eating steak off baccarat plates and pretending like my mother's trailer park in Dayton didn't exist. At first, it felt like a fairy tale. Then I realized I was just one more story she liked telling herself. Camille had this way of making you feel chosen. Like a spotlight had hit you and the rest of the world fell into shadow. But slowly, the spotlight burns. She criticized the way I dressed, called my hoodie depressing, and replaced my sneakers with loafers I never asked for. Then came the passive jabs. How I wouldn't understand certain conversations, how some people just weren't raised for this world. But I stayed. Because I loved her. Or at least, I loved who I thought she was. And maybe I needed her approval more than I ever admitted. I convinced myself I was building something, not just software, but a life. I didn't know I was just the flavor between rivalries. Her ex-husband, Vincent Grange, lives in the apartment next door. An oil-backed trust fund brat with a smile like a snake. She used to tell me he disgusted her. Called him a relic of everything she escaped. But there she was tonight, walking barefoot into his apartment, giggling like a schoolgirl while the man she claimed to love lay in bed just 20 feet away. It wasn't an affair. No, this was worse. It was spiteful. She wanted me to see it. She wanted to break something in me, something she couldn't quite name. And at that moment, she did. But not the way she thought. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, letting the last traces of denial bleed out of me. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It just stopped caring. She thought I was weak. Disposable. She thought my silence meant surrender. But silence is where I do my best work. She didn't know that while she was playing games in her ex's bed, I'd already begun rewriting the rules. I stayed up the rest of the night with my laptop open, screen glowing like a war drum. The code I wrote wasn't for her anymore. It was for me. That was the night I disappeared. The night she made a move she thought was checkmate. And I took the king and the castle, without ever touching the queen. I wasn't born into her world, the polished glass, the designer silence, the champagne brunches that taste like cold ambition. No. I was born in a town where the church bell rang louder than any ambition we dared have. Where men worked with their hands and came home exhausted, and dreams were something you whispered about but never chased. My name's Cole Dawson. I'm 32. Grew up in a rusted-out corner of Ohio. My dad was a mechanic who never made it past high school, and my mom. Well, she left when I was 9. Just packed a duffel bag and said she needed air. I remember that day more clearly than I remember any birthday. My dad didn't say much, just kept drinking his lukewarm coffee and staring out the window. That was the first time I understood silence could scream. But even back then, I knew I was wired differently. While the other kids were stripping bike parts or sneaking smokes behind the shed, I was trying to program games on a borrowed laptop from the school library. I taught myself Python before I learned how to drive. I didn't know then, but those lines of code, they'd become my way out. Scholarship to a mid-tier university in Michigan. Lived off peanut butter and Red Bull. I graduated top of my class in computer science. Everyone expected me to land a stable job, settle down, marry some girl from the same background. But I had different plans. I wanted more, maybe not money, not fame, but freedom. The kind of freedom only power buys. And power speaks one language fluently, tech. New York was a slap in the face the first year. I'd show up to pitch meetings with mismatched socks and a $40 suit. They'd smirk, pretend to listen, then move on to the guy with the Rolex and the perfect teeth. But I had something they didn't: I could build. Not just code, I could engineer systems, data infrastructures, predictive models that could make millions dance to one command line. That's how I ended up on her radar. Her name was Madison Hale. CEO of Halevest Capital, one of those ruthless boutique investment firms that made a killing in fintech but pretended to care about disruption. She was everything I wasn't: elegant, ruthless, educated at Brown, grew up in the Hamptons, the kind of woman who drank wine that cost more than my month's rent. She walked into a demo I was giving for a smaller firm she was investing in, and her eyes didn't leave the code on my screen once. By the end of that hour, she handed me her card with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Ever thought about building something for a real empire?" She wasn't flirting. She was sizing me up. I see that now. I joined her firm as a lead architect. Just a contractor at first. She introduced me to her world, her penthouse on 59th, her art gallery, soft openings, the kind of dinners where people wore ambition like a cologne. I'd lie if I said I didn't fall for her. Not instantly, but steadily, like a man sinking into quicksand and convincing himself it's a warm bath. She made me feel chosen. Like I was more than just some Midwestern outsider who could write beautiful algorithms. She let me move in 6 months in. Called it efficient, and said I needed to integrate with her rhythm. But really, it was about control. I didn't see the signs at first. She rarely said, "I love you," but she'd praise my code, my mind. She wouldn't touch me for weeks, then pull me into bed like a command. I was never her equal, I was her fascination, her project. And the deeper I fell, the more invisible I became. Professionally, though, I soared. Under her name, I built the entire encrypted transaction system for Halevest's upcoming IPO. I embedded layers so elegant, even their CTO didn't fully grasp how integral I had become. Madison never noticed either, she was too busy collecting enemies and compliments. The thing is, I didn't want revenge back then. I just wanted her to see me. To stop talking to me like I was a prized algorithm and start looking at me like I was human. The people in her world laughed at my background. One night at a gala, some drunk hedge fund brat asked if my dad still fixed trucks. Madison didn't defend me, she laughed. That was the beginning of the shift. Something cracked. Not loud, but deep. I stopped bringing up my ideas in meetings. I stopped telling her when I missed home. I even stopped correcting her when she pronounced Akron like it was some Eastern European country. I became her shadow. Useful, invisible, efficient. And she loved me for it, because the less I asked for, the more she believed I needed her. But I wasn't hers. Not really. Somewhere inside, the boy who watched his mother leave and his father break still lived. And that boy? He learned one thing very young: never show your plan before you leave. So when she cheated on me, not with love, but with spite, I didn't break down. I just started writing my exit script. Line by line. Bite by bite. One betrayal had brought me into her world. But mine would erase me from it, and take everything she thought I was too weak to hold. I always thought betrayal would come as a scream, maybe a fight, or even a breakdown in the rain like in the movies. But mine came quietly, like a whisper of wind in a locked room. No noise, just the slow, acidic realization that the person I loved was dismantling me piece by piece and enjoying the process. I noticed the changes before I admitted them. At first, it was the eye contact that faded. Then it was the late-night texts she tried to hide behind fake smiles and half-explained meetings. Her scent changed too, subtle but different, a cologne that wasn't mine lingering on her skin when she returned from yoga. Her name was Victoria Pierce, CEO, Manhattan royalty, the kind of woman who could turn a boardroom into a battlefield and walk away untouched. I was the outsider who cracked her code. Not just her company's encryption framework, but her. Or so I thought. It started with humiliation. Subtle, precise. In meetings, she'd cut me off mid-sentence. Leave the strategy to the professionals, she said once in front of the CFO and half the development team. I laughed it off, but it cracked something inside me. I knew that wasn't about business. That was power. She was drawing a line in front of witnesses. Reminding me who built the penthouse I was sleeping in, who paid for the black cards in my wallet, who made me possible. I tried to talk to her that night. I asked her why she was distant. Her eyes, those cold blues, didn't even blink. "You're sensitive lately," she said, sipping her $600 wine like she was bored of the conversation before it even began. "You should talk to someone." "I'm talking to you." "No, you're projecting." She was so smooth. Every jab came wrapped in silk, so I couldn't even bleed properly. And still, I stayed. Why? Because part of me believed I'd done something wrong. That I wasn't enough. That if I could just fix myself, she'd look at me like she did when we met, like I was fascinating. The final blow came on a Thursday night. I'll never forget the sound of the heel tapping across the marble floor, or the way the hallway light made her silhouette glow. I'd just gotten home early, client call cancelled, and poured myself a drink. I didn't announce myself. Didn't make noise. That's when I saw her. She was in her robe. Not the one I bought. The silk one her ex gave her when they still owned the Hamptons house together. Her hair was down, wet from a shower. No makeup. Just raw, unapologetic beauty. And she walked right across the hall. Apartment 39B. Right next door. I stood by the window, my glass trembling. I didn't move. She didn't know I was home. I watched the door to 39B shut behind her. And I stayed there, staring at it, for 36 minutes. When she came back, her robe was wrinkled. Her hair was messier than before. She smiled to herself, like a teenager walking back from forbidden pleasure. When she finally noticed me, standing in the shadows, she didn't flinch. "Oh," she said. "Didn't know you were back." That was it. No shame. No excuses. Just oh. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door. She didn't follow. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting every little breath she took beside me, calm, slow, victorious. She slept like a queen in conquered land. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Not cheating. But the deliberateness of it. The spite. Who does that? Who cheats with the man next door, in full view of the person they live with? She did. Because she knew I wouldn't leave. And she was right. For 3 more days, I stayed. I brushed her hair. I made her coffee. I even helped her prepare for a shareholder meeting. I said nothing. Not because I forgave her, but because I needed time to understand what she'd done. Victoria didn't cheat because she was bored. She cheated because she could. Because it thrilled her to know I saw it and still stayed. Power. That was always the point. She wasn't sleeping with him. She was dominating me. On the fourth night, she said it aloud. "You're not going anywhere," she said, lying in bed, eyes on her phone. "You love me too much to leave. You always will. And you need me more than I ever needed you." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't even trying to win anymore. The game was over. In her mind, she had already beaten me. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled. But that night, I began to pack. Not my clothes. Not my shoes. My revenge. I started backing up files, mine. Source code, intellectual property, encryption modules that bore my name. Things her company ran on. Things she legally had access to, but not ownership of. I found my old notebook, the one she laughed at, filled with code fragments and structural designs. I stared at every page like it was a weapon forged just for this moment. For months, I had poured my soul into her empire. I built the architecture she bragged about at summits. The infrastructure she sold to Silicon Valley for a pre-IPO valuation of $800 million. She thought it was hers. It wasn't. She had me sign a standard contractor's agreement, nothing more. She wanted control without the paper trail. Typical Victoria. Trust no one. Own everything. Except now, that arrogance would cost her. I knew then, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't confront her. I would vanish. Not out of weakness, but as a warning. She wanted to dominate me emotionally. I would erase her economically. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even cry. I just sat on the cold marble floor that night, staring at the space she'd walked through hours ago wearing his shirt, barefoot, smug. The room still smelled like her perfume, expensive, predatory. Jasmine with an afterbite of something chemical. She knew I saw her. That was the point. Her revenge wasn't quiet, it was staged. A performance just for me. But here's the thing she never understood, I don't fight loud. I don't storm out or throw tantrums. I was raised by a man who taught me to make silence louder than shouting. My father once told me, "Son, the best revenge is the kind that never needs explaining." That night, I stood up and made myself a promise, I wouldn't confront her. I'd vanish. And when I did, I'd take the one thing she truly loved, control. She always underestimated me. To her, I was a well-dressed accessory, the self-taught genius from nowhere. She paraded me at board dinners like a novelty act. Look at the working-class kid who writes algorithms like Mozart composes symphonies. She didn't know half of what I'd built in her company was mine, literally mine. I wrote every line of the encryption engine that powered her transactions. I created the multi-signature protocol that authenticated high-frequency trades. What she didn't realize was that I never signed away the IP rights. Buried in the mess of contracts was a simple clause, anything I created off-site on my own hardware. Still legally mine. And I'd kept everything. I started small. Deleted my personal data from every company server. Wiped my presence from the HR databases. Froze the dummy email accounts that managed the back-end keys. Most of her staff were too arrogant to notice. Her CTO didn't even know how to read my core code. He once asked me what asymmetric key diffusion meant. Child's play. I created a new company, quietly, anonymously. I registered it out of Delaware, using an agent who owed me a favor from years back. Named it Hollow Wake Systems. The name meant nothing, and that was the point. Then I rerouted the code. I extracted every line that belonged to me and recompiled it into a new platform, a digital infrastructure shell she couldn't access without my master keys. Within 3 weeks, the foundation of her entire fintech ecosystem was sitting on servers she didn't even know existed. It was like stealing the skeleton from inside her empire, slow, surgical, precise. But revenge wasn't just technical. It had to be emotional. I visited the one person she hated more than losing, her first husband. The neighbor. It took everything in me not to put my fist through his teeth, but instead, I bought him coffee. He smirked when he saw me, expecting a scene. I smiled. "You think she slept with you to feel powerful?" I said. "She did it to get a reaction from me. You were just a mirror she used to hurt herself." His grin faltered. Then I handed him a single sheet of paper, a summary of her recent illegal crypto hedge transfers filed under his name, thanks to access I still had when she used my terminal. "Don't worry. I deleted the backups. Just wanted you to know she's never loyal to anyone. Not even her pawns." I walked out. Never saw him again. Next came the money. She was preparing for the IPO. A multi-billion-dollar public debut that depended on one final round of capital validation, something I had configured to auto-trigger via a proprietary algorithm. One press of a button from my end, and her projected value would instantly drop. But I didn't press it. Instead, I cloned the transaction infrastructure, stripped out her branding, and activated it under Hollow Wake systems. I filed a patent under my name that made her core tech look like a stolen derivative. I wasn't just stealing her future, I was proving that it was always mine. Emotionally, I was unraveling, but I kept control by treating it like code, step by step, one function at a time. I sold my watch. Bought a cheap burner phone. Booked a one-way ticket to coastal Maine under a pseudonym. Rented a mailbox under a different name, just in case someone tried to track my location through old business contacts. I paid a small law firm in Nebraska to notify me if any legal correspondence came in. They knew me as Mr. Gray. They never asked questions. Each night, I returned to our penthouse and pretended everything was fine. I kissed her forehead. I asked about her meetings. I nodded when she lied. She never knew the whole floor of her life was already missing. And on the final night, I packed my duffel bag. I left the gold ring she gave me, her grandmother's, supposedly, on her pillow. No letter. No digital trace. Just $80 million worth of financial assets, algorithmic control, and company leverage in offshore accounts protected by Swiss privacy laws. She wouldn't know what hit her until the first stock analyst asked why her core transaction system was being flagged for IP conflict. I left quietly. Just like she always assumed I would. But she'll spend the rest of her life wondering how the man she thought she owned dismantled her entire world without once raising his voice. I didn't leave in the middle of the night. That would have been too kind. Too dramatic. Too cinematic. No, people like her expect spectacle. Apologies. Closure. Tears. Something they can twist into a new narrative that keeps them the center of attention. Instead, I left during the day. While she was busy being worshipped at a fintech gala in Midtown, smiling her icy smile for press photos, fingers wrapped around a champagne flute like a queen gripping her scepter. I sat at her glass-top dining table, dismantling her kingdom line by line. No rage. No shaking hands. Just silence. And code. I started with the root-level API gateways I'd written for her platform's cross-chain transaction modules. She never understood what I actually built. She thought I was just a talented monkey with syntax, not the mind that designed the system securing over $80 million in tokenized assets across 5 international exchanges. It had taken me 6 months to weave the kill switch into the back end. It was my quiet rebellion, the one thing I owned outright in a world where she claimed everything, including me. I clicked Deploy on the private server I hosted in a cloud node registered under my deceased grandfather's name, just one of dozens of failsafes. The assets began to migrate. She'd find out later that night that her vaults had been emptied. The world would call it a breach. A cyber attack. But really, it was an exit. Mine. I packed nothing but my laptop, an old watch my father gave me, and the wedding band she never let me wear in public. It wasn't a real wedding, she used to say. Just a contract. We don't need symbols to validate us, she insisted. But I did. I left the ring in the freezer. In a tub of mint chip ice cream, her favorite, right next to the emerald pendant she gave me as a bribe after our last fight. A little theatrical, sure. But I knew she'd find it eventually, screaming into a spoon after she realized I was gone. From there, everything was calculated. The firm's merger was set to finalize in 48 hours. That gave me enough time to invalidate the transaction pipeline. By the time her legal team discovered the assets had moved into blind irrevocable trusts and tokenized shell wallets, the SEC would already be combing through her holdings for compliance violations. All I had to do was light the match. I forwarded every email I'd archived over the past year, insider conversations, offshore tax instructions, bribery disguised as consulting fees, to an anonymous tip line at the Wall Street Journal. Not because I wanted fame, but because she did. And she'd built her brand on being the clean fintech queen. The press would feast on her. And still, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I thought of her face when she told me about the neighbor. How casual she'd been. She smiled as she said it, like she was offering me a cigarette after screwing someone else in the next room. Don't act like you're shocked, she whispered, her eyes boring into mine. I made you. You wouldn't even be here if I hadn't pulled you out of your sad little basement job. She was right, she had pulled me out. But she also buried me in her shadow. Now, I was unburying myself. One stolen coin at a time. I made my final call from a burner phone, sitting in a yellow cab. I hailed the old-fashioned way, just for nostalgia. Is it done? My lawyer asked. It will be, in 3 minutes. The offshore trusts are sealed. No connection to you on paper. Perfect. You really want to go through with this? You'll disappear completely. No going back. No second chances. There was never a first. I hung up and tossed the phone into the Hudson from the 14th Street overpass. I never liked the Hudson. Too dirty, too bloated with secrets. But it felt appropriate. It had swallowed worse men. When the cab dropped me at the private hangar in Teterboro, I didn't flinch. My passport, fresh, fake, flawless, said I was Nolan Chase, freelance systems analyst. My actual name was now just another unsecured data point in a sea of metadata she used to own. I boarded the jet without looking back. She'd wake up in her cold white bed. Alone. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. And a missing $80 million that once represented her control over me. I imagined her expression, shock melting into rage, rage into desperation, and finally, into something that looked like grief. But it wouldn't be sad for me. No, it would be grief for the version of herself she could no longer perform. The benevolent queen, the genius founder, the seductive gatekeeper. All of it shattered. And then it happened. At 10:04 a.m., as we lifted off, I received a ping through a secondary alert system I set up weeks ago. She tried to log into the server. 3 times. Each one failed. And then, a full lockout. The logs showed an IP trace from her penthouse, then from her office, and finally, this made me smirk, from her lawyer's firm. She was scrambling. There it was, the feeling. Not joy, not satisfaction, but closure. The exact inverse of what she left me with. I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to understand. I just needed her to know that I could leave, too. Not like the others she discarded or humiliated or ruined. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even flinch. I took what I earned. What she dangled in front of me for power. The difference between theft and retribution is intention. She weaponized affection. I simply walked away with the ammo. By the time she realizes I'm gone, by the time the headlines hit and the subpoenas come flying in, I'll be somewhere with no signal and a view of the sea. Not to hide. To live. For the first time in years, I won't be anyone's accessory. I won't belong to anyone but myself. She slept next door out of spite. And the next morning, I vanished, with her 80 million, and my soul intact. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. And this time, it's mine. I live quietly now. No headlines, no emails marked urgent, no staff meetings where I'm talked over and smiled at like an obedient intern who should be grateful for scraps of power. Just ocean air and silence. It's been 7 months since I walked out of that penthouse and vanished. No note. No goodbyes. Just her ring on the pillow and her financial empire drained by her own hubris. The world never saw me coming. Neither did she. I bought a weathered house on the Maine coast, not far from where my father used to take me fishing as a kid. Back then, I used to think silence was punishment. Now, it's my freedom. I've filled the place with second-hand furniture, books I always meant to read, and shelves of broken tech I repair with no real urgency. I teach local kids how to code twice a week at the community center. The ones who've already been told what they can't do. The ones nobody sees. Some days I wake up and wonder if she still screams at board meetings, asking why the system doesn't work, why the platform is unrecoverable, why no one can trace the exit nodes. I wonder if her voice still carries that air of condescension, if she even realizes what she lost. But I don't think about her often. Not anymore. She left me long before I left her. I just hadn't accepted it. She had everything, status, wealth, the sharp edges of confidence wrapped in designer silk. I was never her equal in her eyes. I was just, useful. Until I wasn't. Until my feelings became inconvenient. Until loving me required vulnerability she couldn't perform. When I watched her walk into the neighbor's apartment that night, barefoot, laughing, wearing his shirt, I didn't feel rage. I felt confirmation. She'd wanted me to see it. A final display of dominance. She believed I'd grovel or rage or beg. But all I did was think. And when I left, I didn't just take her money, I took it back me. 80 million. It's not sitting in some tropical vault. Most of it went to build something better. Grants. Startups. Anonymous donations. A scholarship in my mother's name for women in tech from working-class families. I'm still deciding what to do with the last few million. Maybe something reckless. Or maybe something boring. I like boring things now. She tried contacting me, of course. 4 weeks, then months. Her lawyers, her PR team, even her therapist tried reaching out. Then came the voicemail. I never meant to hurt you. I was scared of how much you mattered. Please, let's talk. I'm willing to give you everything back. Just talk to me. I listened to it once. Then I deleted it. She was still negotiating, even then. Still trying to control the narrative. But I'd already rewritten it. I'm not the man she broke. I'm the man who watched himself break, and then rebuilt from the ashes with hands steadier than she ever allowed me to have. She was a storm I survived, but I'm not afraid of the weather anymore. I know what peace feels like now. And it doesn't come from power or wealth or even revenge. It comes from knowing she has to wake up every morning and remember. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't leave a single word. I just walked away with everything she thought she controlled. And I never looked back. There's a boy I teach named Marcus. He's 10. He wants to build an app that connects stray dogs with local shelters. He asked me why I don't work for a big company anymore. I told him, because I already built something that changed the world once, and next time, I want to do it without selling my soul. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Tomorrow's forecast says rain. I might go down to the pier and watch the storm roll in. Let the wind hit my face. Let it remind me that I'm still here. I lost everything I thought mattered, and found the only thing that ever did. Myself.